This is La Bataille de Hagelberg. This is an offering from Marshal Enterprises in lieu of a full-scale publication this year in light of the current situation. It is print and play, small, a map, special rules, order of battle, and the scenario, arrival, setup, and victory. That, along with the artwork for the counters, gives you your free game. Only a moron would take a free game and turn it into an expensive game, and that's what I'm going to show you here. This is the map. It actually runs north to south here. It is designed, the artwork is designed to fit on two 11 by 17 sheets of paper so that you can print it out either easily at home or possibly at an office supply store. I opted to do something different. La Bataille games are usually gigantic affairs, huge battlefields, huge forces, but some of these print and play tend to be very small, and for a while I've wanted to increase the size of the components from the standard half-inch counters to the 5/8 inch counters, and this one lended itself to that pretty nicely. So I started out by increasing the size of the map and the hexes to accommodate the larger counters. So I did that, and I have the artwork from Marshal Enterprises, so I expanded it, and then I sent it off to a printer to print professionally. Now, there is an unfortunate mistake. I didn't catch this when I printed it, but on the north and the south, this is the south, they actually cropped the image and therefore the map a little bit. So on the left here, there should be about 1.5 hex rows more, and the same on the right around Leibniz. There should be just about one more, maybe 1.5 more hexes on each side. Other than that, the map came out pretty nicely. Again, it's professionally printed, one single sheet, nice heavy stock paper, satin finish. So I'm happy with that part. Next came the challenge of making the counters. Now this is the order of battle provided in the resources by Marshal Enterprises. Fairly small, few regiments, some cavalry for the coalition, and some infantry battalions, a little bit of cavalry and artillery for the Imperials. Now from that and the counter artwork file, I created my own visual order of battle. They actually didn't provide one, but it's not a big loss. It's hard to tell, but these all look like normal counters, right? But I actually blew them up to be large. This would be a standard half-inch counter, and just a little bit bigger the counters I'm going for. So I enlarged the artwork, printed it out, and I wanted to make counters that size. So those are the 5/8 inch counters that I created to go with my larger footprint map. And I made it for both the French and the coalition forces. So I had the map custom printed. That cost me. I could have made up these counters by hand, but I realized, I have 1 million informational markers at a half-inch size and 0 at 5/8 inch. If I were to make these up by hand, I would have had to have made the forces as well as all the informational markers, and I just didn't want to do that. So after making up and laying out the artwork correctly, I sent it off and had both informational and the forces custom manufactured for me. So there's a lot of fiddling with PNG files, but after that I didn't have to do anything. For the most part, I'm pretty happy with the way these counters came out. At the very least, I didn't have to do the work. There's some mistakes here and there, but that's to be expected, because there's always little mistakes, aren't there? But here's the full OOB for both sides. The French have a bunch of third-line battalions, a little bit of light infantry, some Saxon and Westphalian, pretty good artillery, and then some small weak cavalry. Not a large force. The Prussians have a much larger force. They have one very nice reserve infantry regiment here, some light troops, a little bit of artillery, then a lot of Landwehr, big infantry regiments, and then this Landwehr cavalry, and finally some Russian Cossacks. Now, this Landwehr cavalry looks great on screen. Like, the artwork for this looks really good. It really pops. But when this stuff prints, it always comes out a little darker. So it's a little harder to make out with the naked eye. As far as mistakes go, there's a little bit of color bleed here. A little mistake there. But otherwise, I'm pretty satisfied with the way it came out. Since I had the artwork and I could do whatever I wanted with it, I added some things I like to the back, like, hey, the little bugle for light troops, and the artillery on the back of artillery units, and the little saber on the back of light cavalry. Just simple little things that add a tiny amount to your enjoyment. Don't really make any difference, but I figure as long as I was going to print this stuff up, I may as well do it the way I wanted. And one thing I like to do when I have a really huge game with lots of scenarios is I'll make up scenario, order of battle, visual order of battle, and order of arrival for that scenario. Since this thing is basically just a small scenario, I did the same for here. So now I can kind of visually see where the French set up and which units arrive for the coalition and win. So I'll be using that when I set the game up, not this OOB that is more typical of a Le Bataille title. Now this is basically just a small scenario. Starts at 6, goes to 11 a.m., so that's basically 15 turns. I think the actual historical battle lasted into the afternoon, but I think in typical Marshal style, they want to put some time pressure on the player to get things done within a frame of time even more aggressive than they did historically. And that's how they measure their victories. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started on a setup here. So here's the map under Plexi and my solution to the problem of the cropped printing. I just created these little extensions, brought the map over on the south by Klein-Glien and to the north by Lubnitz. So some of the interesting bits about this map are that little windmill height there dominated the field. French artillery was there. There's also this wall outside of Hagelberg that they use as a defensive position. But otherwise, it's a fairly standard looking Le Bataille map with woods and slopes and towns. The French start alone on the map, so I'll get them set up. So here's a representative French setup. Some guns on the hills astride the road there, along with the French infantry and some skirmishers out in front of them. The Westphalians and the Saxons back behind. And kind of a vanguard out here at Lubnitz. Now the cavalry is actually off to the north, and on the first turn they will enter from the north coming back south. I'm not sure that maybe they shouldn't be routed when they enter, but they are under full steam. They'll be able to take positions alongside their infantry. The Prussians will be coming in also from the north on either side. Well, I think 4 hexes either side of the road. And they don't come in force. Some cavalry, then some Landwehr, then the reserve infantry, and more Landwehr. And they sort of start building their power as the morning goes on. Now later in the morning, the Russian cavalry, the Cossacks, will be coming in from this direction here and putting them on a flank position for Hagelberg and the French position. I think the most interesting thing about this fight is that it's really fairly well balanced. The French line infantry is not that great. They don't have good firepower. Their morale is kind of average. They do have good artillery. The Prussians are similar. That Landwehr is big, got terrible firepower, not very good morale, but they have pretty good melee. So learning to use them effectively is going to be key to the coalition winning this fight. And historically, the coalition do win this fight. They drive the French out of Lübnitz, Hagelberg, and back to Klein-Glien there. So you need to do just as well in order to meet the historical expectations. And the victory conditions reflect that. There's no casualty or morale victory points here. It's merely capturing geographic locations. Prussians can push them out of Hagelberg and capture some hexes of the small village there. They're going to win a substantial victory. If the French are able to hold on to this area, they'll win a substantial victory. So capturing territory is the object of this particular battle. So here are some of the coalition forces in their order of arrival. They'll get some cavalry in the first turn, then some Landwehr infantry, followed up by this very good reserve infantry, and then the rest is Landwehr. So the Landwehr is big regiments, not so good morale, 35, squarely into the average. They do have some skirmish capability for their 3rd and 4th battalions, but in general, their battalions are very poor combat firepower, average melee, and not very good morale. One of the key factors is they cannot form line formation, so they can only fire with that column printed value. And they can't form square in the face of a charge. They can form it in their own movement, but not if they're charged. So the French may have some opportunities with their cavalry, even though it's not very strong. The Landwehr cavalry is kind of big, not necessarily all that strong, and again, poor morale. One of the things is that in order to launch a charge, they have to pass a morale check. And they can opportunity or reaction charge, of course, because of that requires a morale check, but initiating a voluntary charge requires a morale check for the Prussian Landwehr cavalry. Another special rule for the Landwehr is that if they are fired upon by artillery, French artillery, and they suffer a casualty, they actually have to roll a morale check in order to advance again. I think that's based on history. At least one battalion was fired on by artillery and then refused to move forward, causing a couple co-located battalions to also refuse to move for a while. So be careful going against the French artillery with that Landwehr. Here's the situation 1 hour into the battle, 7 a.m., middle of the turn. And the Prussians have all but taken Lübnitz over here. Have one French battalion got surrounded. 2 have been put to the run. A little bit of charging Landwehr cavalry there. This other Landwehr charged in order to screen the charge of that one. So he's probably going to take a drubbing there. But otherwise, seems likely that the surrounded French battalion is going to be ejected, and the Prussians will be able to continue to assemble their strength and go for the main position here around Hagelberg. And there's the final outcome. Prussians did occupy that hex, ejected the French, who disordered from the melee. A couple of Prussians failed their pre-melee morale check and had to retreat. That cavalry melee actually was pretty inconsequential. They all fought it out, but nothing really happened. Now for the Prussians, when they rout off map. They can recover, so we have 3 units here in rout status. But when they recover and they re-enter the map, they lose an increment. French not so lucky. If they rout off the map, they cannot re-enter. So it looks like the Prussians are in firm control of Lübnitz, and they likely will be able to continue forward in the next 2 hours here to put some real pressure on Hagelberg. Here's the situation at 9 a.m. The Prussians have had a bit of a setback. I'm going to say that the national fervor of the Landwehr caused them to throw themselves forward when they should have been a little more patient. They suffered some reverses at the hands of the French cavalry, but they are regaining their strength and now getting ready to flank the Hagelberg position. But unfortunately, the French are still in a really strong spot. So with only 2 hours left in the game, it's going to be a pretty tough job for the Prussians to take Hagelberg and even get back here to Klein-Glien. So as the last of their forces assemble, they'll try to turn that flank, see if they can push the French into a position they don't want to be in. Here's the middle of the 10 a.m. turn. The French are definitely in some trouble here. Their right flank has collapsed. This battery was unable to limber up and get away in time, so he's kind of blocked in by the first of the arriving Russian Cossacks, as well as some Prussian Landwehr there. There is some routed Prussian formations, but they probably will be able to remain on map and recover, so there's not a lot of time left. The Landwehr cavalry has been doing some good work here. Cavalry scrum up here, but the Lancers managed to rout that French unit there. The French have suffered 3 units routing off the map, so they will not return. That's 3 out of 10 units. That's a lot of strength. So basically 3.5 more turns to go. Prussians really have a long way to go. They have to take this town as well as at least 2 hexes of this village here in order to win a substantial victory. It's possible, but they probably will need the help of the Russian Cossacks there. And there's the final situation at the end of the 11 a.m. turn. As usual, you do stupid things at the end of games in order to try to eke out some sort of victory condition. So the French very stubbornly held to a couple of hexes in Hagelberg, even though they were completely cut off. But they gave a shot at trying to hold the town and failed on the last turn. 1 battalion was destroyed, another was put to disorder here by the Prussians. They did manage to hold 2 hexes of Klein-Glien there. But otherwise, all French forces are either routed or destroyed. That's the 1 Saxon Jaeger battalion that was ejected from the town on the last turn. Otherwise, there's a lot of routed Prussian Landwehr and plenty of Cossacks waiting to eat up the fleeing French. I'm not sure how to determine the victory conditions here. They state that the French win a marginal victory if they can hold 2 hexes of this town, which they do. It also states that the coalition wins a marginal if they hold all of Lubnitz, which they do, in all of Hagelberg. So, is that a draw? Do the French conditions take precedence? I'm not sure. But anyway, from all appearances, this is a coalition victory. The French army is put to the run, and 1 or 2 more turns would probably destroy the rest of it. So that's a look at La Bataille de Hagelberg. An interesting little entry in the La Bataille series. Free print and play from Marshal Enterprises. Not quite free, but you can probably build it for less than $10 US, plus maybe 2 hours of your time, depending how good you are with scissors and paste. Small footprint, small forces, and an interesting little puzzle for each side to solve. The coalition is the aggressor in this case, and figuring out how to handle that Landwehr is pretty crucial. It's really not that easy. I'm tempted to try to keep them together as those giant regiments maybe the next time. See if I can bulldoze my way through those French lines a little more quickly. Get myself to a substantial coalition victory. And all in all, I think this is a welcome little addition to La Bataille, and possibly the only title we're likely to see this year at least.